starting now.
Okay.
Welcome to Converse. This session is called Modern Workplace in Africa, the New Frontier. This will be presented to you by Tom Mcdowell. Tom?
Good morning or good afternoon if you're joining us from elsewhere outside of Europe or the States. Thank you very much for joining today. I hope the next 45 minutes or so is a valuable use of your time. There's so much great content going on at Converse today. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to all the sponsors. FITTS are just one of many of the different sponsors who made this possible. The amount of information, knowledge, content, everything that comes from all of these partners and organizations is immense. So really do make the most of the next day and a half that we've got left. And hopefully you enjoy my session. So I'm going to be talking about Africa and the new frontier for modern workplace, and I will go through the presentation shortly, but first to introduce myself. So I'm Tom Mcdowell. I work for FITTS in our Africa office. I'm the East Africa country manager for FITTS. I've been living and working in Nairobi since August 2018. Prior to that, I was in FITTS in our London office for about 6 months. After I joined from the digital workplace practice at Accenture. I've worked for a number of different clients across the world, and hopefully I can bring some of that kind of experience and knowledge into the presentation today. So this session that I'm presenting is going to be sharing a point of view. So I'm hoping that rather than kind of convince you of anything, it sparks a conversation. It offers something which I hope is different to the other content that's here at Comsverse. There's so much great stuff going on. I wanted to try and bring kind of a different point of view to you. I hope that at the end of the session, if you haven't already engaged in the market in Africa, you do consider it in the future. And if you're already part of it, I hope that some of the information I'm sharing gives you confidence in the investments that you're making or supporting other people in making. Because I believe that the investments that in modern workplace in Africa will deliver dramatic returns to the organizations who make them and the African economy as a whole, especially when compared to similar investments in Europe or North America. Now, I don't propose to know and be the font of all knowledge around this, so I've called on research and data and information and points of view from a number of different sources. So you'll see them dotted throughout the presentation, but McKinsey, Deloitte, Forrester, Forbes, IDC, PwC, these guys have a wealth of knowledge, and while there isn't the same depth and breadth of information out there on Africa and kind of local countries, there is a huge amount that we can benefit from those guys as well. So first, I'm going to talk about why Africa. Now, Africa is not a homogeneous space. It's a whole continent which is huge. So while oftentimes generalizing can be a mistake, there are definitely, when we talk about modern workplace, some common threads we can pull on. So some of those are shared challenges, but some of them are also shared opportunities. So as an example, across Africa, 90% of passenger travel is by road. That's a kind of lack of rail and subway and tram infrastructure that you might see in the heart of London or North America. In the context of Comsverse, what this means is that traveling to a traditional workplace is much harder than traveling to a traditional workplace in the UK, as an example. 50% of those roads that 90% of people are traveling on are unfinished as well. So when we talk about just inconvenience, it's also a safety issue, and the time to get to a workplace is significantly different as well. Another example of kind of shared opportunity is that 86% of fiber cabling across Africa is now complete. So there's only 230,000, I say only, 230,000 kilometers remaining to reach the kind of global, the continental target of achieving universal access. So huge strides have been made recently in delivering fibre broadband across the continent, which is an important platform for modern workplace. Then economies across Africa tend to be growing faster than others in the world. In fact, the 6 of the top 10 are the fastest growing economies. 6 of the top 10 fastest growing economies are in Africa as well. And despite this, only 2% of the global market share for services exports are in Africa as well. So there's a huge amount of opportunity there where untapped services exports, which we can capitalize on with the right infrastructure. So while there are unique pockets, different countries have different challenges, whether it's policy or infrastructure. There are some global kind of globalized opportunities and some Pan-African challenges which we're going to be looking at. So we've looked at broadly why Africa, but the other half of the question that I'm posing, the kind of premise of this conversation, is modern workplace. So defining the modern workplace is important. So we're going to look at that next. And I'm breaking that down into 2 things first. So first is modern, and what do we associate with modern? And it can be anything from data, connectivity, technology, user-centric. There's all sorts of different words we bounce around when we're talking about the modern workplace, particularly that modern part. But then the workplace itself is also constantly changing, and especially in the times we are living in at the moment, is more than just a traditional office cubicle between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. It's about the cafe, it's about the desk at home, the type of seat you're in, the lighting you've got, the camera you've got. It's your workplace is much more than just a desk in an office. So the definition I'm going to propose to you of a modern workplace is something that I'm sure you have your own definition. You've seen 100 of these, and each organization will have something different. But fundamentally, it's important that when we talk about modern workplace, it encompasses these things. So modern tools, it uses data, collaboration, culture, and mobility. But the second part of that statement is what I really want to draw attention to. And it's not good enough to just deliver these things for incremental gains. Modern workplace is really about aligning those enhancements and improvements to dramatically improve innovation. So this is not just getting small cost savings or counting widgets or number of minutes on a phone call. It's really about delivering good or significantly improved outcomes in innovation. Research by McKinsey says that adoption of technology can do more for the economy. So it's more than just an organizational growth. It can actually have better outcomes for the economy as a whole, and also for employee and people welfare. So that's something that we're going to be looking at the modern workplace from the lens of organizations and what they can achieve. But it's also worth keeping in mind that when technology is adopted and changes are made to the modern workplace, there's a wider impact across society, which is particularly prevalent in Africa as well. So the next thing that you might kind of associate with the definition of modern workplace is the breakdown, and it's very common to see people, process, and technology, or technology at the center of this, or users at the center of this. So there's all sorts of different ways of framing this problem. But what I'm doing is I like to look at modern workplace through these 4 components that push and pull against each other. So you've got people, which is really to do with the skills and the match of skills to the demands of the job. So education and training, the human capital of an organization, but also of a society. Place, which is a physical space, and in kind of times of coronavirus and pandemic, this is increasingly important. The physical provisions of a workspace are just as important to making it modern and delivering innovation as the technology and the people and the process. Process can be as structured as onboarding and provisioning of services to new employees, but it can also be kind of intangible things like innovation culture and the way that you service ideas through your organization. And then technology, which I think is probably the one that attendees and presenters of Converse are the most familiar with. So access to consumable technology, security protections, connectivity, it's all the enablers that you can think of which make a modern workplace possible. So all I've done so far is lay the groundworks and set the kind of the lens that we're going to look at this this kind of statement of delivering returns in Africa against modern workplace investments. So I've just kind of established that framework, but now we're going to look at Africa in particular, and I'm going to talk you through some data points or some indicators that I believe support the theory that investment in modern workplace is going to deliver more significant returns here. So I'm going to take them step by step with those 4 areas we talked about before. So first, people. This statistic is astonishing. So right now there's 705 million working people in Africa. So the working population is 705 million. By 2030, that is expected to cross over to more than 1 billion, which means that it's growing faster. The workforce is growing faster than anywhere else in the world. So despite positive growth, studies are consistently showing that there's a shortfall between demand and technology skills and the output from universities. So what organizations need from their people to deliver in the global economy, when we talk about the services industry and exporting, and also kind of internally about delivering technology enabled businesses, there is a shortfall. So employers identify inadequately skilled workers as a major constraint to their business, and that's backed up by the fact that only 20% of graduates in Africa are enrolled in STEM courses. So that obviously needs to increase. But it's not only about too few graduates. What we do have are mismatches. So we have people coming out of education and work jobs, and they are either underskilled, they're being hired for roles which are too demanding for what they believe. And this is based on surveys of employees themselves. This is not just a perception of employers, which tends to overestimate how underskilled people are. But employees themselves, particularly young employees, are going into workspaces and they're reporting that they don't feel their skills and their preparation matches the work they're being asked to do. But what I really want to draw attention there is in Africa, you've got an 18% overskill for work as well. So this is untapped resource, untapped capability and preparation for delivering outcomes, innovation, sales, revenue, or whatever measure you want to look at. There's a mismatch. But there is progress, and what you see is vocational training in Africa is impressive. So 29% of firms are offering vocational training, which is higher than Southeast Asia. It's got a long way to go to catch up to Latin America, North America, and Europe, but there are countries which are really leading the way. So Rwanda, Botswana, Kenya, and Ghana all lead the way with more than 40% of their businesses offering vocational training, which is a great way of taking the human capital that they've got and transforming them to meet their needs. And this is shown by programs. So Microsoft for Africa launched a few years ago to develop skills. There's an Interns for Africa Microsoft program as well, which FITTS participates in, among other Microsoft partners. And that's really about developing niche technical skills for specific roles. We can't expect as businesses to receive state qualified engineers and architects and consultants and things for that services economy and modern workplace without having to invest something ourselves. So the fact that African organizations are really investing in this training, we'll see this mismatch close out. What we actually see as well is that the main driver for training tends to be modern workplace transformation. So the number one cause of people rolling out training to their employees, and you'll have probably seen collaboration sessions going on and adoption and training sessions within this. The number one driver of employee training in Africa is technology change and organizations that are buying international vendor software. So that's Microsoft, your AWS, SAP and Oracle. Those sorts of things are really going to push the boundaries of what is delivered for employee training. But it's not just about skills, it's also about culture. So I spoke before about kind of the hard and fast of qualifications, but also about the culture. So PwC did a survey of millennials globally in the workplace. And what they found is that 65% of millennials, typical kind of feedback was that they felt they were held back by outdated and rigid work styles. But they actually found that in Africa, it was 75%, which shows that despite kind of a shorter time to embed legacy technologies and also a overall younger workforce, they are still held back by outdated and rigid work styles more than their national or global competitors. This shows two things. So one, there's a workplace technology is probably lagging behind expectations. So the expectations of what a young person entering the workforce has in their personal life around use of mobility, technology, personalization, bring your own device, that sort of thing is far away from reality, or further away from reality than it is in other places, leading to those. But it also means that the culture that is applied at work of innovation and agility is not there. So they're not seeing a prevalence of innovation programs or the ability to speak up, flat cultures, that sort of thing. And that slows down speed to market and employee satisfaction and retention. So I mentioned place and physical space as being an important factor. Now, co-working is not, and flexible working is not a kind of a determinant. It is not the be all and end all of a modern workplace. You can have modern workplace in fixed office spaces, you can have it at home and everything else. But it's a great trend indicator for the movement of a modern workplace, because it is a finger on the pulse of demands for connectivity and flexibility. So the more mobile a workforce is, the more they will embrace co-working or flexible space, because they don't want to root themselves in expensive or long leases. It also doesn't always translate into modern workplace when you go into a co-working space. I've seen some shocking examples. We took a long time to choose our space in Kenya for our office, but it is an indicator that people are thinking and consumerization of spaces is on the rise. So where you've seen it, huge amounts of growth early on in North America, things are slowing down. Europe is still growing rapidly. I think Germany is the fastest growing co-working location in the world, but Africa's growth is huge. So if you compare that to North America, it's 5 times the speed at the moment. So while there's relatively few office spaces per million people, and that's organization kind of businesses, not desks. Don't worry, you've not got half a desk per million people. There is a huge amount of growth demonstrated year on year. So look for that to catch up. And as I said, it's an indicator that people are thinking twice about their space. They're embracing mobility, they're embracing scalability of technology, and also their physical workspace. Workplace data. So in our definition of modern workplace, we talked about why data was important for modernizing the workplace. So this is analytical insights, it's driving data privacy, it's IoT, those sorts of things coming into the space to measure welfare, well-being, productivity, and everything else. But it's an interesting landscape. So compared to data privacy law in Kenya came in 2019, and there are only 24 of the 53 African countries have legislation in place, so there's still a long way to go. LinkedIn data for data protection officers suggests that much of the change associated with data privacy is yet to come. So if we look at just the number of people with a role title data protection officers, we have 99 across the whole of Africa. There's slightly more in North America and Europe, which has really embraced the data privacy trends over the last 5 years, has significantly more. And if you were to overlay that against DPO per capita in the organizations, it would be even more stark. In the whole of Kenya, there's only one data protection officer, Safaricom leading the way with that person, and as you might expect, the majority of those 99 are in South Africa. So from a modern workplace perspective, this has two implications for us. So one, regulatory change has not yet happened. It is going to happen, or it could happen in the near future. And if not managed carefully, or regardless of managing carefully, it could divert attention. So budgets, focus, strategy, everything else could move away from innovation and modernization and focus more on achieving compliance. So if that's done poorly, it can lead to less mobility, less flexibility, less innovation. It also means that using employee and behavioral data to gain insights and improve things, so the use of adoption usage data to drive adoption, and the way that we do things today in Africa, what is available in compliance may soon become non-compliant or be banned. So when we're planning these things, we need to be careful about how we implement them. And before we build too much dependence, we should have a plan for how we achieve compliance. As I said before, technology is the enabler that sits alongside a lot of this stuff, and it's impossible to talk about modern workplace without looking at connectivity. So connectivity underpins access to cloud, IoT, AI, everything else that we associate with kind of a modern workplace technology. Penetration is the key measure here. So how much universal access is there, and particularly looking at broadband and 4G. So there's a huge amount of progress made. So we're at 400 million broadband connections across Africa, which is 20 times what it was in 2010. 4G penetration is on the rise, growing faster than anywhere else in the world. And the cost of data is coming down. It's got some way to go. The target is for the benchmarking for affordability is that it's 2%. A gigabyte of data is 2% of your monthly annual income. Now it's dropping, but it's not quite at that benchmark in Africa. But there is more positive news. So while there's a lot of work to do, there is positive news. Ericsson anticipates that Africa will be the fastest growing adopter of 5G technology, which underpins mobility and working from home without having to put in fiber to the home. And data consumption has grown 700% over the last 5 years. So if you combine that penetration of 5G and universal access of 5G with the 80% mobile phone penetration in Africa, it means that there's a huge market of people who have access to a device which can connect up to network, and you combine that with 5G speeds, you suddenly have a dispersed but connected workforce. So remote working mobility becomes even more important. There's untapped resource. The 300 plus million people who are due to enter the workforce in the next 5 to 10 years will be able to connect into workplace and enterprise services from wherever they are in Africa. And public cloud access is the other piece of technology that's a key indicator. So North America has had AWS and Azure public cloud since back in 2006, so 14 years worth of access to it. Europe has had at least 10 years, and Africa is just getting on the bandwagon with 2 years. But that doesn't paint the whole picture. So cloud has been available in the continent before, so it's been growing at 30% per year on year, in private data centers and private clouds that were on the continent. But access to international services like AWS and Azure is a significant indicator of both the potential but also the foundations for accessing services. We did a latency test from our Kenya office to Western Europe and to North America, and the South African North data center has only been there, as I say, for just over 2 years. So the difference is double. So the latency from Kenya to the South African North is around 300 milliseconds. So it's over 600 to get to the next best, which is in Europe. So when you think about services that are dependent on access to data and impacted by latency, the prevalence of data centers and public clouds within the continent is a huge enabler for growth and for complexity of services. And if I refer you back to the point that we've only got 2% of the global services market share, this is held back by the fact that we can't build technology that competes in terms of scalability and speed and performance compared to those guys in Europe and North America, which could change, or it should change. So what we've looked at really are kind of foundational indicators. So they aren't the answer, they aren't the opportunities necessarily, and all they are is a selection of things. There are many complex factors. You can go through government spending, you can do import duties, and many more things to look at. But what we've tried to highlight are some of the key kind of enablers or factors that show that the trends indicating that investment now in a modern workplace will kind of deliver dramatic improvements. So what we're going to look at really are some of those strengths and opportunities that are associated with this. So referring back to those indicators, we've got a growing access of connectivity. So 4G, 5G, fixed broadband, whatever it might be, there is a huge number of people coming on to enterprise grade levels of connectivity every year. There's also a lack of legacy infrastructure holding back cloud adoption. I was running a cloud program at Lloyds Bank some time ago, and they had applications and services which had been built in the late 90s that they'd never been able to upgrade or move, and they were just constantly shuffling them along on life support before they could go into the cloud. There's not that level of legacy holding back change and transformation in Africa. The barriers are much lower. And also the supersized workforce. So the competition for workplace jobs and roles and things will be enormous. There are hundreds of millions of people coming into the workforce over the next 5 years, and that is going to make it an intense place. But it also means that the talent pool is going to be enormous. That's coupled with a couple of weaknesses, and particularly STEM education. So as I said, only 20% are there. So we're going to have to combat that with workplace vocational training and also policy change. Electricity, the reliability, but also the cost does make counteract the connectivity. So we can look at improved speeds and penetration of mobile and broadband data, but if the power is not there and we're relying on batteries and other things, cloud services are increasingly at risk of progress. And then finally, global market share means that the export revenues are limited. So the injection of cash that is needed to fund transformations is difficult to come by, and it's competing within the boundaries of a country if there's no exports. So what we need to do is address that. So in terms of opportunities, reimagining the workday, so moving away from that 9-to-5 workplace experience is going to have dramatic impacts on that road transportation. So if we looked back at people who are commuting more often than not in Africa, having to commute in urban centres via road. So return to normal, if you compare return to new normal, as I should say, in London after the pandemic is a case of getting back onto highly invested tube lines and subways and trains and things, whereas return to normal in Nairobi or Lagos is about jumping in your car for traffic jam, 9 to 5 crush to get everyone to the workplace at the same time. So the opportunity for modern workplace to relieve pressure and the benefit to employee welfare, to productivity, is significantly greater than it is about people who are returning to work in Europe or North America. Data privacy has a long way to go in Africa. As I said, there's only half the countries have legislation, and there's a significant underrepresentation in corporates and SMEs of data protection roles. But this can be a huge springboard for technology. So modernizing your compliance and regulations can allow you to drive investment into the way that you manage data, the access to data, the tools and services that people do. And that brings with it mobility, it brings with it security, which can foster growth and innovation. And then there's an opportunity to revolutionize culture in organizations at a speed that isn't seen anywhere else. The number of young people who are due to enter the workforce and the overall age of the workforce means that there is no comparison in the demographic of the African workforce compared to the European or North American or even the Asian workforce. There is going to be a change in the dynamic, and that should or could bring with it faster route to market and faster innovation. But we have to be wary of 3 costs. So looking at those weaknesses, regulation could bring with it a diversion of budgets or focus, as I said before. It can also limit access to global markets. So if we're trying to access and modernize our workplace so that we can tap into delivering services globally, then the data protection and data regulation has to be in place. So that has to be solved, and it has to be solved in a way that doesn't detract from workplace modernization. And the cost, and there's no way getting around this, the cost of modernization has to be budgeted for. Thankfully, through cloud technologies, you can spread this subscription-based things. Technology and services does help move from capex to opex, and it should reduce the overall investment. So if we invest small amounts now and make it scalable and ready for the next generation, it will deliver benefits. And then finally, talent sourcing. So we looked at the job mismatch, and then the 46% of people who feel they're either underskilled or overskilled. So we need structural changes to make sure that people are, 1, getting the right training and education, but 2, they're ending up in the right job. Underskilling or overskilling leads to lack of productivity, lack of job satisfaction, lower wages than they should be, and ultimately less productivity, less revenue, less sales. So I'm going to take a stab at some predictions for modern workplace, and I see there's going to be 4 different trends over the next 5 years. So I think there's going to be future proofing. So if we look at onboarding and offboarding, public cloud consumption, that huge volume of people coming into the workforce needs to be planned for, and that's about scalability. So consuming Office 365, building cloud services, building applications that have hyperscale capability. VoIP telephony, so I'm sure this is a popular topic here, direct routing, Teams and the like, but distributed telephony and central control is really important. So if we look at compliance and regulation, but also allowing people to work remotely, having a corporate or business grade telephony solution which can be managed centrally but accessed remotely is critical. It will also become more affordable as data becomes cheaper, and allow African businesses to compete globally as international calling becomes more affordable. The remote worker. So I think the trend of people moving to urban centres is going to continue. So that's not going to change, but they won't necessarily have to travel into the office. So the access to what urban centres has to offer is going to continue. But what we should see is that people are highly connected, reduced demand on the road, and it'll be a decentralised model. So people are working as virtual teams. And then finally, the rise of the DPO. So they are going to be a huge factor over the next 5 years as to how data protection programs are implemented, whether Africa can compete globally in regulated markets, and whether or not employee privacy and analytics and insights and things are available to those of us who are driving adoption of technology in the workplace. So we've been through the workplace piece and we've looked at strengths and opportunities. We've looked at what it is that brings Africa together in this picture and why we're looking at it as a whole. But regardless of where you are, you need to look at how will we measure the impact? How will we determine whether or not we are driving dramatic change and it's not just incremental benefits? This is the same whether you're in Johannesburg, Nairobi, or in London. We can measure this through sales and revenue. So are we increasing our top line of what's coming in the door? Are we looking at major savings in terms of costs? But that's quite a bleak picture of just productivity. So are we just taking kind of more in and spending less? That's one half of it. But then also looking on the other side of the picture, which is your employee and talent, so retention and attraction. So you getting the right talent? Are we closing those mismatch jobs? Are employees feeling like they're well placed in the workplace, and are employers feeling like they're getting the right talent there? Things like mobility and remote workforce and improved physical spaces will improve employee attraction and retention. And what we should see is that if we've got the physical and modern workspace right, those numbers should tick up. But what's really important, and we'll go back to our thing, is innovation. So as the time to market improves, there's an enterprising culture and technology combining, then what you'll see is products coming to market which meet the demands of the global workforce. So it's not about finding products and services that have been developed elsewhere and then making them fit. It's making products and services which can be exported to global market, but also developing technology solutions and products and services that meet the needs of Africa before anyone else can do that. So I believe that across all of these, we're going to see a greater return on dollar for dollar investment in an African modern workplace than you will anywhere else, because the opportunities are huge. The threats are there, but we can mitigate those with careful strategies. And I think the final thing to mention is that the modernisation of workplace is going to deliver growth for organisations. So dollar investments for the likes of Safaricom or Liquid Telecom or anyone along those lines, whether you're an SME of 5 users or an international university in Africa, you're going to see these sorts of benefits for yourselves. But reminding you of the McKinsey studies that for individual organizations is one thing, but there are far-reaching implications of technology adoption for society as a whole. So access to services, the growth of education and societal improvements and welfare, distribution of income and access to information. So the impacts on that side of things are also worth keeping in mind. I think that's it. So that's my my kind of conversation starter. I hope you found that useful. I am really excited about the opportunity to be part of the FITTS team in Africa. Our group there is delivering amazing stuff for our customers. So I do encourage you, if you are here and you're planning to deliver a workplace modernisation initiative in Africa, please do introduce yourself. If you're interested in free modern workplace workshop with our team in London or in Nairobi, please reach out. I'm going to go over to our breakout room in a moment. So hopefully see a few there. If not, just reach out directly.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for your talk on Africa, the new frontier. Let me see if there are any questions from the audience. Yeah, so audience, if you have any questions, please use your Q&A button to ask your questions. Okay, there are none, but while maybe waiting for that, can I just ask you a question? Two questions, Tom. So how are the people like in Africa?
How are the people?
Yeah, I haven't been to that part of the world, so just wondering how. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I'm sure that some of the people in the audience I've seen, so some of the people registered will know Africa and African people much better than I do. But as an outsider, incredibly welcoming. My wife is Kenyan as well, so we yeah, I'd love it. It's there's a strong, particularly in Kenya where we are, there's a strong focus on the future, so both on kind of providing welfare and jobs and opportunities for young people. So the education sector has a huge amount of government investment, so there's a very strong sense of optimism, but that's coupled really with kind of friendly attitudes as well. Okay,
so one more question that I have is, is there a market for, I mean, I don't know how to use foreigners to work in Africa, and how welcoming are the countries in Africa to that?
Yeah, so that's definitely differs country by country, but there is a focus on creating job opportunities because they have so many young natives coming to the workforce. There is a strong directive to create opportunities for people locally, and try and always source in country first. So there's a it can present itself in difficulties to get work permits, authorization, that sort of thing. But again, kind of country by country, that does differ.
Okay. All right. Let me just look out if there's a question. Okay, so there is, so there is one from Ben Lee. Do you think a lack of local O365 Azure data centers hinders user experience in adoption?
Yeah, so it's an interesting point. So one, the point I made about latency is I think a reason why there's been there's kind of been a lag. So it's only been 2 years since we've had a data center in Africa, and we are still looking at only one. So if you're in Sub-Saharan Africa and you're trying to connect up to West Europe, you're looking at kind of minimum latency of 300 milliseconds. And when you look at voice and video and data critical services, that's not particularly good. So there's still a long way to go in making that better, but just having that one data center there has improved things. It also can create data residency challenges. There's no option for African governments to really enforce data residency within their national borders and also compete on a global level. So they're having to kind of make compromises on that. But with kind of proper networking, so the breakout to the internet as quickly as possible, the fiber backbone and undersea cables and things, there's been a huge amount of investment. So I said 84% of the target's been met, and there's kind of a much higher percentage of that in terms of the undersea cabling target has been met. So if you manage to get out to the internet and get onto those fiber backbones, then generally the user experience for the average user is definitely workable. It doesn't hinder it, apart from kind of maybe some niche cases. It's the really high demand performance services, kind of applications in Azure, which are really affected. But from the average business user, no, not at all.
All right. Okay, thank you, Tom. I think that's all the time we have. So I'm posting the breakout session where you can
Yeah.
have a chat with Tom. And so thank you for watching, guys.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you for your help.
All right, no
Thank you,
problem.
everyone, for joining.
Bye-bye.